You guys, welcome back to the Self-Selecting Podcast. I am joined today with Jasmine Shier. Jasmine, thank you so much for doing this. As we were kind of talking about before, I followed your journey, your milestones throughout your bodybuilding career, and your pro physique, dude. Like I remember seeing that come up on Instagram, and I was so blown away. Your shape
Thank
is obviously like if people follow you, they know your shape is freaky. The amount of mass you carried even then, but then like also to see you now in your
yeah.
build and like to see you just putting on so much density, it's cool. It's inspiring.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. I'd love for you to just give like listeners an idea, a little bit about who you are, what, yeah, where you are in your bodybuilding career for those who aren't familiar with you.
So, fitness wise, I started out doing more strength sports. So, I competed in powerlifting first for a good 4 or 5 years. Then I moved to CrossFit for another 4 or 5 years, and I competed there on not like a super high level, but if anyone's familiar with CrossFit, there's like scaled and RX, and I got into like the RX individual competition. So I was going for it. And then, as I got older, I started to feel like I was just injured all the time. It was really kind of wearing on me mentally and physically. And to be honest, I wasn't enjoying how my physique was looking. Like if you're familiar with a typical CrossFit female body, we use our core a lot, so there's a lot of like oblique buildup. So feel like I was like looking really blocky. And then my husband Justin Shier had been into bodybuilding for the last couple of years. He had not turned pro yet before I started, but or no, he did. Sorry, he turned pro. And my dad and mom were actually in my past bodybuilders, not on the pro level, but like my dad competed at 50. The last time he competed at 50 was the same show that I did, my first show. So I've kind of like grown up knowing what it is. And then seeing Justin go over, I was like, I want something still to be like competitive in, but I feel like these strength sports are not doing it for me anymore. And I love bodybuilding training, so I just went for it and did a local show, and then a year later did nationals and turned pro. And now here I am 1 year after turning pro, ready to start prep for my pro debut.
I don't think I realized how quickly you established yourself in the pro league. That's incredible. And like for listeners who aren't familiar, and Jasmine, she competes in figure. That kind of muscle at the regional level, at the national level, like you're not fucking around. Like
Yeah.
you aren't gonna accidentally build that figure physique. Like that is something people are working so hard to achieve. And I love that you mentioned kind of like with CrossFit, the shape wasn't really what you were driving with. And like it's funny because people I get probably CrossFit the most from like Gen Pop. Like people will be like,
Mhm.
oh, like you compete in CrossFit. I'm like, I'm gonna go shoot myself. Like, okay, cool.
And they're
Yeah.
incredibly dense. They have
Thank you. Yeah.
shoulders and traps and arms. But yeah, you develop more trap dominance and like a kind of blockier waist from a lot of the like transverse loading that you do. You're in a lot of planes of movements. And as much as I enjoyed like dying on the competition floor, like laying dead on the gym after a good like workout, it just aesthetically it wasn't what I was hoping to look like, in my 30s. And also just it wears on you mentally, like just the amount of effort it takes and amount of critique. Not that bodybuilding is lacking self-critique, but yeah, it just was not no longer making me happy. So I moved on. And so I think that kind of surprises people sometimes, like how quickly I did turn pro. But if you think about how long I had been in the gym still, I had still been in the gym for over a decade. So,
Right.
a lot of people are like, oh, one show and then two show pro. But I'd still been putting in in the work.
I I love that you brought it back there because that is a really important distinction that I think listeners like should pay attention to because oftentimes even if someone is like, I want to do bikini, how long is it going to take to turn pro? And I think there is this false expectation that, I mean, and yes, objectively, like someone's going to have an easier time turning pro in bikini than figure. Like, I don't think anyone would argue that. But I think oftentimes when you do see individuals like yourself who seemingly on paper have a very short period before they turn pro, I'm oftentimes like we're not surprised to say like yes, like you've been in the gym, like you already had that density, and I'm sure there's more specificity in like refining the shape, and maybe even on the conditioning side, just like okay, how lean do we need to get for your physique? But I mean, like I think it's incredible what you're able to do, and I mean like the it's amazing also because people often associate they're like, well, if I do direct core work in any facet, then I'm gonna spend so long like undoing it. And I don't know, like I was showing my boyfriend Jordan your pictures, like one of your throwbacks on Instagram, and like the first thing he said, he's like, yo, her waist is like fucking so small. And
Yeah.
like that's, I'm sure, structurally, like, yes, an advantage, but like, even with years of CrossFit, even with years of doing a lot of movements that probably targeted the core at such high volume, that doesn't seem to be an issue. If anything, that seems to be like a very big strength of yours.
I'm still a bit confused how that happened. I don't know if like it atrophied as I like it was like my obliques atrophied as I stopped doing all of that and then focused, more on like building the X frame, or if like I don't know, it's obviously genetic, but I was very, I think, lucky to come away unscathed in that way. But it does go to show you that a lot of that compound loading that people are scared of, like,
Oh,
does not
girl. Yes.
actually, yeah, like ruin or create this blocky physique. Because obviously, a good example of how years of compound loading, and I was still able to like come in with that snatched waist.
Yo, your waist is snatched. Like it's circumference wise, like you gotta be like, it's gotta be
Yeah,
22.
I have never I need to measure it. Like I haven't done that yet. Like in a,
Yeah.
prep setting.
Yeah. I definitely encourage listeners to go just ogle. I don't even, I'm maybe making that work up. They know what I mean. To go take a look at your physique, just like take a peek because you touched on something so important. The fear around the compound lifts, around lifting heavy, which like this is one of the things that I mean, like in your build, like you've been growing, like intentionally growing for how many months now?
Yeah, about 18 months almost. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's a commitment. And I mean, like I watch your story every day. Like I see it. Like you're deadlifting a shitload, you're squatting, you're doing a lot of unilateral movements, you're lifting a ton. And I mean, like I'm really curious, like where are you in terms of like the whole waist trainer, like
Mm-hmm.
belted lifts? Like has that ever been something that's come up, I guess even like in
Yeah.
your last prep or this prep, is like how do we like keep the waist tight?
I I'm so like conflicted on this topic because what I practice and what I preach and what I see, like there's so many nuances to that. So, I sometimes I do wear a waist trainer, but it's mostly just because like it makes me feel more confident in an off-season setting to like wear a tank top. Not necessarily that I believe there's any science behind. I mean, scientifically it has been proven not really to do much. But if you wear it for like confidence sake, whatever, just know that sometimes like I think there has been some proof behind it causing your core muscles to weaken. So that's something to take into effect. And then I do wear a belt for like heavy squats, but otherwise I don't. Um, Deadlifts, I just brace really well and use my core. And so I think there's a really good balance between like overdoing it with the waist trainers and the belts and then also still utilizing, your core appropriately. I think I'm a good example of how you can find that balance and then it still lifts out really well.
Totally. And that's where I kind of asked that question, not really knowing like where you fell on that side of things, because I know there are a lot of competitors who are very adamant. They're like, hey, like without a waist trainer, I'm not going to have the look that I'm going for. I personally like I've tried them in the past. I've tried the hardcore ones, the corsets, and
Yeah.
like realistically, like I've found preps where I've been able to keep my waist just as tight, if not tighter, and get it smaller without it. So I don't know. I can just speak to my case, like, hey, I don't think it is necessary. And specifically, when we're talking about training, like throughout my last build, I feel like if anything, that would have been more of a deterrent. And I guess I should specify because for listeners, they're probably like, what's the difference between a waist trainer and a belt? It's like, well, in the case like we're talking about, you need that extra support to brace your core, like under a lot of weight. Using a lifting belt, I think can absolutely be appropriate, but oftentimes, especially more so in my sphere, my demographic, I see a lot of athletes kind of live and die by like I can't train if I don't have like my Squeam XXS on, and I'm like, oh man, that's such a shame, like because I don't know if I don't believe it's doing nearly as much as they might think it is.
Right. I see a lot of competitors use it just for the whole workout. They've got their belt cinched, and I'm not, what are you doing there? That's not necessary. And I have not found a difference between a like say a prep where I used a waist trainer versus a prep where I didn't. My nationals prep I didn't. My first regional I did use a waist trainer like during cardio just for like some additional like thermogenic maybe sweating. Um, but I do see a lot of people in the gym just got their like lifting belt on the entire time, and
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of negatives to that because as I was saying, you find that your core muscles actually weaken if you don't use them, and so you have a harder time holding it in. Like if you go to pose, you have a hard time like contracting and using and like holding it in. So I think that people shouldn't wear them as much as they do.
No, I'm with you there. Like I this is, and it's one of those things like very similar to PEDs. I try to be open-minded and curious. Okay, like even if someone does something differently than my than the ideology I follow, okay, maybe there's a reason, maybe there's something I don't understand, or just frankly, maybe there's a difference of opinion. And even on the waist trainer topic, like it's not something I push my clients to do because I much would rather them like develop that pelvic stability and that
Mm.
skill of bracing their core. And I've just found like, I mean, it carries over so well to being able to get really strong, which I guess I want to go into when you turn pro. I'm sure there was maybe not a down period, but there was a period afterwards where it was like, okay, realistically, what do we need to do to be competitive? What was what was that analysis like watching the game tape? What was that like for you? And I'm assuming that was you and your coach, maybe you and Justin, like just to kind of get like inputs from, professionals that you trust.
Yeah. So I'll just start with my feedback. It's probably the same feedback that every figure competitor gets is more density in the back, more delts, sharper through the glutes. So the focus has been to specify my training a little bit more this last off season compared to my previous off season where I just needed kind of overall density. But now, this as entering a pro, you kind of need to specify your training a little bit more to tailor to your physique. So I'm still lifting as heavy as I was, but it has kind of been tailored to the areas that I need. So a lot more delt work, a lot more glute hamstring work, and then a lot more like upper back density. But otherwise, my training style has not changed. Like I'm still relatively low volume, still going for to failure on like two top sets, still lifting as heavy as I can. I don't particularly avoid anything. If I want to do it, like I'll do it. But I do focus more on my weak areas.
No, I like that. And I I think at the time of like we're recording this here middle of June. I should have a video actually coming out on like individuals who think they're too big for bikini and making that decision, do I want to switch to figure or wellness? And I remember I recorded this maybe a month ago. I was like, I really should have, like, this needs to be a conversation with a professional figure competitor, but I was trying to be very forthcoming with like, this is my perception and understanding around what I'm seeing in the criteria and the changes that a lot of top athletes are aiming for, striving for. And that's where in that video, I kind of like went a little bit deeper into the amount of muscularity isn't something you can really out condition. And I remember that was like a mental note. I was like, I really should run this by Jasmine or Steph Roth, someone who is kind of in the trenches of like, okay, this was my feedback. How do I actually apply this so I can place, well come next season? And is that something in the pursuit of turning pro and now like getting ready for this prep? I guess like really, I'm trying to formulate the right question here. How are you, I guess, how are you feeling? Yes. How confident are you with the size that you have now? Because like you're a tank, like you look incredible. And
I guess we'll find out it's so, I see the pictures of the girls, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're huge. And then I see them, say, like backstage or at the expo walking around, and they don't look that big as compared to like their stage photo. So how big really are these girls? And I guess I will find out when I stand next to them. I still feel really small compared to most of the pro league. I still feel tiny, but I definitely still need to put on a lot more size strategically in the right areas. And I'm willing to do that. Like I'm still comfortable with where I'm at, and I'm comfortable with needing to get bigger. I do think that there is this sort of thought process now in trying to shift down the size, and you're seeing in these divisions, with the introduction of fit model and maybe some of the choices of the winners of these shows. I think they're trying to bring it down a little bit, but I guess we'll find out if I'm big enough. I don't know. We'll see. I think I still need quite a bit more size, but I think my shape and maybe the shift in them wanting to kind of like maybe put a cap on how big these girls are getting. I think I'll do well this year.
I think you will too. I'm really excited to see what that final package looks like. I mean, you've definitely paid your dues in the off season, in the growth phase, and I think that's something that a lot of people they underestimate, like the changes when you go division to division. That's like you're not just committing to getting bigger, but you're also committing to the time it takes to get bigger. And it's something that like you and I kind of spoke about over Instagram a while back around like, okay, like how can I go about this strategically? Like, and that's a conversation I have with a lot of individuals, some in bikini, some in figure, some in wellness, where it's like there are absolutely individuals who are less concerned with the risk they take in order to put on that size. And I guess I would love to hear your input, just like knowing that like you have a super competitive physique, and structurally, like I think that's something that a lot of people they can build around, but like if they don't have like the waist you have, if they don't have the insertions, then like realistically they're gonna have to explore other strategies.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear your input just on seeing like, okay, uh, here's the gap between where you are, or I guess like where you were maybe at the beginning of your off season to where you are now. And really the thought process with like, okay, like I'm willing to use PEDs, or I'm willing to, expose myself to some risk. But I guess what was in your mind really that cutoff as far as like, okay, but here's what too far looks like, or here's what too risky looks like. Does that make sense? I asked that so backwards. I'm sorry.
I'm definitely I am willing to take on some risks, but there is a point in which I do not want a line that I do not want to cross. So I'm willing to put in the work in the gym and the diet. Like, that's fine. I'll do that. I will use some PEDs that I've used in the past that I have been safe with, as in like I have not experienced sides, and I'm fine with using those. I'm very apprehensive about some of the things that I may need to use in the pro league as we get farther along. Um, I definitely will not cross that line though to the point where like I lose my voice, or that's my main thing is like I do not I will quit. I'm not willing to risk that. Like if I lose because I'm not willing to do the things that I need to do to be competitive at that top level, but will most likely result in me losing my femininity and the fact on the voice or facial changes, etc., etc. I'm fine with that because I still have to be happy with myself when this career is over. And I do not want to be, you know, done with bodybuilding and realize that I have like done things to me, to my own body that I have to live with that cannot be changed or reversed. You know, I still have 40, 50 years of living to do after this, and I want to be happy with myself, not just for this. It's a goal. Like it is like a dream and a goal, but I'm not willing to risk certain things for that. So
I
be it.
I love that. And I mean, I think it's really important to have a voice in this space, putting out such a responsible message, especially in the position where I'm sure talking with other competitors at the pro level or even at the upper end of the national level and figure, it's like, I'm sure you hear oftentimes, well, it's what everyone does. It's what you have to do. And I guess I wonder, like, has that been something even on the way up to turning pro or throughout the off season now? Has that ever been a little discouraging or a little intimidating to hear,
Oh,
here are
absolutely, yeah. Because I for almost 100% certainty that most of these top girls winning the shows are doing things that I'm probably not going to be willing to do. And that does scare me that maybe I won't be able to do well at these shows because I'm not willing to do that. You know, it is really intimidating and discouraging to think like, well, if I'm not going to do that, why should I bother? You know, but I think that maybe, if enough of people like me are out there who are, staying safe within their boundaries, are competing, we could possibly change the landscape of, what that looks like. But I think I'm talented enough that I could still do well without, partaking in these things that I'm not willing to do.
it's it's a really mature mindset and it's a really brave mindset to have around even being a pioneer in the shift of the figure division and in hoping that your effort and giving, this is your hat in the ring saying like, hey, this is what I think we should set an example for individuals who are new to the sport. This is how we grow the division. This is how we keep it sustainable. I just commend you so much on that. And it very much speaks to the feelings I've had in my own prep right now, because I mean, realistically, a few weeks ago, I had my shows picked out. Last month I had my shows picked out, and I've had so many calls in the last week with individuals at the pro level, at the national level, who the top coaches have just told them like, hey, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams of Anavar isn't going to cut it. And to hear that at the pro level, knowing that like, I'm not going to take 10 milligrams, like in my head right now with my capability, I'm like 5 should be good enough. And if I need to go higher than that, then I should just spend more time in an off season. But that has very much taken a toll on like my mental health. Even in this prep, I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, why would I keep going if I already know I'm not willing to do that. And when I when I hear, swear to God, I had a girl, she came to me because she wants to be enhanced. She has 6 compounds in place, one of them being Osterine, tamoxifen, retatrutide, SLU, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm looking to make the jump to be," and I'm like, "Oh
You
my,"
already made the jump.
I'm like, "Honey, like,"
You're
and
already there.
going through the doses too, I'm like, these aren't even specific anymore. Like, so like the thing with SARMs is like, especially amongst bigger teams, like they're very popular in the bikini division because they're kind of touted as safe and female friendly. Yet we're looking at doses that, even if it is a SARM, even if at one point it could be selective, and no longer is selective at that higher dose. And that's where, yeah, I appreciate you being so honest with your viewpoint, like the mental struggles that you've gone through this build, especially hearing those inputs from others, because it's really hit me hard, this prep, and it makes me consider like what kind of example do I want to put out for others who might want to be in the sport, but realistically like aren't going to be able to make that commitment nor want to.
Right. It's such a conundrum. I mean, that's really what it is because you get critiqued if you do, you get critiqued if you don't, right? Like the general population and the internet trolls or whatever, are so hard on women who do take PED. And then you have the other side where if you're not taking them, you're just not gonna do well. You get critiqued for having a lesser physique. So you're really damned if you do and damned if you don't. It's just gonna be a personal choice. And my personal choice is that I want to be happy with myself afterwards. So I will just continue with the path that I've chosen and see how far it gets me.
I love that. And I think, you're really echoing on something that I think for listeners who are kind of in that position where they're deciding, do I want to become enhanced? Do I want to start, taking on more responsibility there? You're talking about really the very specific line that you've identified as like, okay, for me, for Jasmine, like I don't want my voice to go. So, accepting the fact that the more aggressive I am with the compounds that might be safe, the longer I run them, or even compounds that, put me at a potentially higher risk of these changes, like that's not a decision to be made lightly or out of emotion, which I see a lot of when someone's in a prep or when someone's in a build, when they're receiving pressure from their coach, even sometimes from their partner, from their fellow competitors that like, hey, like it's just a little bit more, like nothing will happen. Like I've used this source or I've used this amount and see, I sound fine. And I think like what you touched on is just so important for individuals to know, like, okay, where's the line where you decide like that's too far for me?
Yeah. So everyone's going to react differently too. What is safe for one person, what dosage is safe for one person might not be the same for you. Like I've known a lot of girls or have heard stories who taken just even like 5 milligrams Anavar and have had some crazy side effects. So you can get the advice and opinion from your fellow competitors, but it might not be applicable to you. So I think you need to do a lot of research, you know, get a lot of the most information you can, and then make that decision based on what are the possible side effects. Can you live with yourself if you incur some of those side effects? So for me, I've done 2 compounds, with some AIs like towards the end of a prep, and those have been safe for me. So I'm comfortable doing those again. But so many competitors fall into, I don't know if it's a trap or during their pro debut specifically, of increasing things, upping the dosage, upping the duration, trying new things, because I think you're entering a new league, right? Like the league is like up here now. So I know a lot of girls specifically who have had a lot of side effects from their pro debut because they've tried new things. But that's such a, catch 22. Like, you are in a new league now. So you do have to step it up, but how you do that is a choice, personal choice, and maybe one that you need to make for yourself and then talk with your coach and just be, willing to take the risk or draw a hard line. There's really only like those two options, right?
Yeah. And I think, kind of like what we opened up the episode with was, how committed you've been to the build itself, how committed you've been to the training. I mean, like, I do think that that's a component within the female divisions as a whole, that largely is mismanaged by coaches in a lot of ways. And it's very sad because I do believe that then you look at pharmacology almost, or people often look at pharmacology as, okay, that's the missing link, when in reality it's like the training performance is so lackluster or disorganized, or just poorly executed, that frankly it's like, okay, well, now you have these drugs in place, but realistically, what could you have gotten out of improving your training performance, making the commitment that you obviously have, and like really learning to get fucking strong and like being able to replicate that session to session?
I mean, how far can you get, if all those things are optimal? You could probably get pretty far. I mean, there are athletes in the pro league doing well who say they are natural, and I believe them. I truly do believe that Sydney Gillen is a lifetime natural. You look at pictures of her 13, 14, her first competition, 16. She basically looked the same. Like, she's obviously a freak, genetic superhuman, but I think there's a lot that you can optimize and achieve, naturally or with a small limited amount of PED.
Totally, totally. I took myself through, I would say, a shorter, more aggressive build last year with just TRT. And it was the first time I'd actually just removed GH entirely. Historically, when I've done builds, it's been TRT at normal to normal high levels, so sub 100 nanograms per deciliter, so nothing crazy. And over that time, I was able to put a significant amount on my glutes. My delts blew up too, which was like
Yeah.
cool to see across the board. But realistically, I went into that build skeptical as far as how much progress I was actually going to make, with just TRT. And like every time that I've been patient with a build like that, or I've been like, you know what, I'm not going to put the compound in place because at this point I haven't really used, I haven't used an anabolic in the off season. I've only used it in a prep, which is probably, in my case, the not very helpful. But every time I've been grateful and like glad that I took that approach. But I guess I want to, there's two things that came to mind when you're talking about Sid. I think oftentimes, I'm sure you get this question a lot. I know I get it. You'll have amateur competitors, even professional competitors who want to have realistic expectations. So they might ask, like, how long is this going to take? How much muscle can I build? And they're looking for something objective to generate that buy-in. But realistically, I have seen so many cases where, like, yes, individuals, they'll in bikini, at least they'll try to stay stage lean, or they'll stay very close to it. They'll put a compound in place and seemingly make really good progress. And I guess I'm wondering, like, do you see that as a reoccurring problem within the figure division, or even like the wellness division, seeing that like there almost is this misunderstanding around like how quickly girls can put on size, I guess, with or without enhancements?
Right. Yeah, I've seen Manon, gosh, I forget her last name. She competed in a pro figure last year, and she's kind of made some switches. I forget her last. She's a Canadian. She put on like 20 pounds of muscle in 1 year. So you do get freaks like that that people see and are like, well, I can do that too. But realistically, for a female, you know, on compounds as well, eating, training, you might put on a pound or two, maybe, of muscle, you know, 3, 4 if you're really, on top of everything. But without compounds, and you're still optimizing it, it might be less, a pound or two, but it's still possible. Um, but I do think maybe in every division, not just figure, not just females, on the men's side as well, you take a year off season, everyone expects you to put on like 10 pounds of muscle. Like my husband is just taking an off season and he's coming into prep and he's definitely improved, but the general audience is probably going to like expected him to have put on like 30 pounds when it's like that's just not possible. There's so many things that go into like an off season. Say you go for a year, you have to have a health phase, right? He did a gut health protocol, so like a long gut health thing where he couldn't really push food, training. So, he really had a limited amount of time to grow. If you look at that year long stretch, it was maybe only like 6 months of proper growth. So I think there is an expectation that you take a year off, that athlete has spent that whole year, growing, when realistically, there's health phases, recovery phases, etc. Um, and especially for females, it can be a little bit harder just because you're not willing to risk that crazy PED usage. So I think you're right that there is probably an expectation that is a little too high. And because realistically, I think a pound or two is probably more realistic for females, maybe 5, 6 for males.
Yeah, no, I think even like quantifying it can be so tricky. And I've done videos on like recomping and like, can you lose fat and gain muscle at the same time? And I did this really annoying video. Like I did it to be annoying, to be like, hey, like here's what you would have to do to like essentially lose body fat every day. And like it kind of goes with the same conversation around like building, is like, if you were only gaining muscle, like how much would you be sacrificing in terms of potential strength performance if you're always like teetering deficit, maintenance, surplus? And like realistically, in between your sessions that are driving that adaptation, if you're not fueling yourself in a way that allows you to build new tissue, then it's like, how much of that time off was actually productive? And that's where within the bikini space, I think, there's this attribution that like, okay, there's less muscle. So like, you really shouldn't swing as far in the other direction from your stage weight. And it kills me to hear these numbers thrown out like, oh, you should stay within 10 pounds of your stage weight. Like, I'm 10 pounds right now. And I'm like, I'm not anywhere like as lean as I need to be, but like any leaner, and I'm probably not going to be productive in my sessions in the gym. And
Yeah, that's a good point. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, no, go
my
again.
husband I'm not calling anybody out, but my husband has a client, a female client who spent her entire off season like 8 pounds up from stage weight. And how much realistically do you think she was able to improve with 8 pounds over stage weight, body composition the entire year? She was very lean the entire year, but was she able to grow? I don't know. There's a certain point where maybe you tip the scales too much, you've gone too much and you put on too much body fat, and now return your return is diminished. But I think it can be said the same thing. You stay too lean and you don't put on enough overall tissue to really improve.
No, and
My
I
husband's grabbing his computer.
No, and I love that it's not so black and white and binary in the sense of like, oh, here's the range in which you should work within. And I think the same thing applies to body fat too. Oftentimes I get athletes who are like, what is the body fat I need to be on stage? Or what's the body fat that like makes me optimal in my growth phase or in my build? And it's like, realistically, like we can assign a number to it, as inaccurate as they probably are. But where I like to guide people or lead them to is like, we should be seeing fatigue being managed very adequately we should see, nutrient partitioning again being managed in a way that doesn't require a ton of cardio to not accrue body fat quickly. But you're training, like, if you're not seeing markers and performance go up, or you're consistently like, I think it's good to feel a little fucked up from your training. And that was very much something in my builds. I'm like, if I didn't earn those days off in between like my lower sessions, I'm like, okay, next, that's a mental note. Next week, I probably need to send it a little bit harder, because like I would almost strive, be like, I want to feel like a little cognitively fucked up the next day.
Yeah.
And I feel like largely like people, and I get like where it comes from. I love the lean physique. I wouldn't do this sport if I didn't. But I think that's part of the commitment that you're making, even PEDs aside, is like when you're trying to put on a lot of tissue, when you're trying to build this landscape, is like you're committing to a period that's uncomfortable in a completely different way than contest prep.
Yeah. And it's so nuanced from athlete to athlete. So what may be a good composition or a good, nutrition amount, like for one athlete is going to be different for another, specifically, like I remember Sydney Gillen in an interview saying that, she walks around all year with like visible abs and glute ham tie-in. And it's like, I don't get that until like, 6 weeks out, 4 weeks. So it's going to be different for, everyone. Obviously, she was at a point where they were asking her not really to grow anymore. So she was more maintaining. But it's going to be so nuanced from athlete to athlete. So what may work for me is might not be optimal for someone else. Like, I tend to, I think, have a little bit more body fat than the average. I'm a little more chunky in my off season, but I do tend to carry it pretty well, like distributed evenly.
That's where your leverage is the best.
As I was saying, like my leverages in my off season setting are a little bit better with a little bit more body fat. Maybe that's me making it an excuse. I don't know, but I tend to do a
You
lot
look
better.
incredible, by the way. Like, so people might, I know I'm hard on myself in my off season, but girl, like you are curvy, but you are fit. Like, and you have so much muscle. Like, also, I'm sorry, this is intrusive. What is your walking around weight in your off season?
I got up to like 166. I'm currently like 159. Started prep, so we're coming down.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I'm at like I wanted to get to 170 so bad, but I couldn't quite cross that barrier this off season. But so next time, but yeah, well, I'm 5'2", 166, 5'2".
That that's impressive. Like, I mean, that's so impressive. And no, I completely agree. Like, you carry your weight extremely well. It's very evenly distributed, which is another aspect, I think, like across all divisions, is like sometimes people, I think, misattribute, like, okay, well, like my abs come in quick or my arms come in quick, not realizing that it's like, okay, but whatever that stubborn part is for you, we need the other things. Like, it's great if they're in, but if they're
They're just
so
gonna get
in,
smaller. They're
right,
just
if
gonna
they're
get
in
smaller.
like 8 weeks before the glute
Yeah.
tie-ins, and that's very much the case. I'm the same way. It's like, like I'm not seeing, I still very much have like softness, dimpling, cellulite around those lower glutes, upper thighs area, pretty much the entire prep. Like, I wear a tank top, people are like, oh, you're ready. I'm like, this is deceiving. Like, I promise, like there's all the fats down there. But
Yeah.
truly, like I think that's been something I've been able to see in concurrent builds, is right now my abs aren't peeled, but that's something that, like, in the past I've been like bummed about and been like, oh, that's, a negative in this prep. Whereas realistically now I'm like, that's a sign that body fat is more evenly distributed. So that's actually like,
It is a good thing. Yeah.
yeah, like
And
it's
everything is
earned.
gonna come in kind of at once. And like you were saying, things aren't gonna have to shrink disproportionately in order to accommodate that lagging body part. So I guess I can be thankful that I'm just like overall a little bit chonky and not particularly. I'm definitely a bit leaner now than I was my very first like off season. I think as you gain more muscle, your body just kind of naturally sits a bit leaner. because it, obviously burns a lot more calories to maintain the additional muscle. So I think as I continue, every year after year, I'll probably be able to hold like a bit of a leaner composition in my off season, but I'm not gonna particularly like try to be leaner unless it is beneficial.
It's such a mature mindset, and like there's so much awareness I can hear in what you're describing without it being judgmental, which I think that's where a lot of, I say novice competitors, and I don't even mean at early points in the amateur league. I just mean like throughout someone's career before they've really accepted, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to strangulate my composition the entire way through a growth phase. Like, I'm going to have to accept it's going to be dynamic. There are going to be days where I'm very inflamed and I'm menstruating, and that's great because that means I'm in a position to grow better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, oftentimes.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Is how much I hear, sorry to this be like a tangent, but how much I hear other female competitors talking about not having a menstrual cycle, even in their off season. I'm like, what? You don't like unless it's like birth control related, you should be menstruating. I had my menstrual cycle up until 2 weeks out, my nationals prep. Like I didn't lose it ever. I hadn't, and I have yet to lose it. So
That's
that's baffling me
amazing.
that some competitors are just going about not menstruating and fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame because I do think it comes from being misinformed around like, well, these forms of birth control, like they're supportive of us, preventing conception. Cool. But that's all they're good at. That's the priority. Like any kind of synthetic form of estrogen, progesterone, it's fascinating to me just how much that takes away from someone's ability to lose fat or build muscle. For listeners who aren't familiar, synthetic forms of estrogen and progesterone, they will decrease circulating androgen. So DHEA, testosterone, DHT, which we don't really want DHT. We don't want a ton of that, but with synthetic progesterone, it can have off-site androgen receptor activity. So especially for females who are using compounds, maybe run a little bit higher in terms of like free test. Yes, they might have high SHBG and they might be prone to some of those, I would say, more superficial aspects of virilization, but it's oftentimes these other inputs that go missed where individuals don't realize like, oh, this is also playing a role in what I'm seeing manifest. But yeah, it breaks my heart when I hear people, they're like almost like bragging about it. It's like a flex. It's like, oh, I don't get a period. Yo, I hate getting a period every month. And every month I'm confused by it when I get weaker and like I feel like shit. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it was 4 weeks ago. Okay. Like I'm forgetful.
Uh-huh.
But
like, why am I so angry? You're being so rude.
yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Flow app is just, it'll explain everything. But
Yeah.
no, that's also, I mean, maybe it is a little bit of a strong man. I'm probably using that incorrectly, but for individuals who want to grow, who are like, I'm willing to do everything. I'm like, okay, get off your hormonal birth control then, because that's not helping you. That's actually making all of this harder. And if we can get you back to a point where things are a little more stable, and I wouldn't even say optimal, just like within range, you're going to benefit because we know that like those states of low estrogen, like that's not conducive with you growing at the rate that you could be growing at.
Yeah. I personally have used for the last 10 years the copper IUD, and I know a lot of people maybe don't have a great experience with that, but it's been amazing for me. The initial insertion 10 years ago, I can still remember. Not fun. But it's been really good for me. Don't have to think about birth control, and my hormones are as they should be naturally. So it's worked really well for me. And there's so many methods out there, you just got to find what works for you. But that's been what I personally use and what's worked really well.
I'm a big copper IUD fan. I just got my second one put in May. And yes, I think a good way to describe the insertion is traumatizing.
I think I just saw something pop up like on my notification about the news that they were talking about implementing pain relief control methods during insertion. Like they're talking about it at least because it has been proven to be like more painful than a mastectomy. And
Yeah.
they get, you know, I think local anesthesia, right?
They get taken care of. For listeners who aren't familiar, when they insert a copper IUD or really any IUD, they they make you have a contraction, which like I got mine at 23 and I wasn't really prompted with what that would feel like, but it was very painful. It's just like it was just very surprising. And this time I was very communicative with my OB. I'm like, hey, like I know this isn't going to be fun, but it is worth it. And that's very much how I feel even in terms of like the heavier days of the cycle. Some people, like I know a copper IUD would be contraindicated, and if they are at risk for bleeding or they start out with very heavy cycles, like this
Yeah.
might not be a good option. But I do think that there are more people that would benefit from this form, or at least trying this form, rather than just accepting and sticking with those synthetic forms of hormones. And I mean, gosh, like this last one, like I bled for like 3 weeks. Like it was not it
Straight.
was 3 weeks straight, and it was like
Yeah.
almost all heavy days. I was like, is this hemorrhaging? Like, is this okay? And
Yeah.
it just went away. So I was like, okay, we're fine. Things
Yeah.
have
The
settled down.
initial the cramping and the bleeding for like that first 6 to 8 weeks can be pretty gnarly. I don't know. So even you had one previously and then you got a new one and you still experienced the
So
bleeding and the cramping?
my first insertion, the cramping was like 2 days, hardly any bleeding. Like, I mean, not even spotting the week of. I had it for 5, 6 years. And it was time to get a new one. They like, I think the strings were a little bit lower, and on ultrasound, they're like, hey, this would be pretty easy just to swap it out. And last year I was having, my immune system was really compromised, and I was seeing a lot of things pop up. They're like, hey, like this has been with you a while, let's just swap it out. That was wise. And like, I mean, that along with a biologic, so an immunosuppressant seemed to help me. But that aside, when I got this one put in place, yeah, it was, I wouldn't even like similar pain, yes, but realistically, I was like the cramping was so bad for about 10 days. Like even in the gym, I was like, I can't train. And like I don't really have period cramps like that, but I was like, I'm worried I'm gonna pass out. Probably because I
Yeah.
was hemorrhaging. Uh but
Probably better to take that week off. So
yeah.
it's more like the insertion itself that is creating these effects.
I think so, yeah. When they force the contraction, it stimulates that tissue, and I think your body can get kind of confused and then think that there's also a need. I looked into it briefly and then I was like, you know what? We'll just let my body sort this self out. And if when I go back for the follow-up, if there's anything wrong. But yeah, I mean, like everything clinically looks good. But I was like, okay, like I could see if someone had this experience for their first time and wasn't really bought in on the non-hormonal aspect, I could see them going back and being like, yeah, like get this thing out of me. Like this is miserable.
Yeah.
But I
There's
very,
growing pains or
yeah,
not growing pains. It's not growing a baby. Yeah, then I've had 10 blissful years of like normal menstrual cycle, normal symptoms. So yeah, it's worth it. I know it's really traumatizing, the initial insertion and the 6 to 8 weeks after, but it's so worth it
I agree.
for me
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. That was a part of like really like when I explained, um, and the interesting thing is like when I was going through my own health issues last year, I was having a lot of chronic infections. Like I was on antibiotics for most of the year. And I went to OBs who, even with the copper IUD, were very insistent that I need to switch to a hormonal IUD. And it really, really was off-putting, even like to look at some of my notes that were charted like in my patient portal to see like they were like pushing it. And like there were notes like, hey, on her follow-up, recommend this. And I was like, oh man, that's such a shame that like that is kind of like the hormonal ones are the ones that are oftentimes being kind of shilled out, where I have had very few experiences myself with OBs, or where clients have, been to their provider and they've been just adequately presented both options. And even, dude, even on the informed consent on the hormonal ones, they're like, yeah, like, and in 6 months, like you might not get a period. So like you're free of that. And I'm like, wait, you're selling this. Like that's the upsell. Like that's
Yeah.
insane to me.
It does seem like that's the go-to for, most providers is they think it's like, putting us on those synthetic hormones is going to solve something, like it's going to help solve whatever, if there are legitimate times in which case taking synthetic hormones is going to be beneficial, whether you've had a breast cancer survivor and you need that, or et cetera, et cetera. But it does seem like it is thrown out there a lot as like the answer to certain, hormonal fluctuations, issues that women have. There, take this, take that, take this.
Yeah. No, it's my my thoughts on just female endocrinology as a whole, I feel like is so far behind other specialties, and that's a big reason right now. I'm working on an ebook. It's like it's way too dense. It's too many pages, but it's on lab work specifically. It's like, I swear to God, it's like 300 pages. Like no one's gonna read this.
It's a novel.
Basically. And the idea is to like empower and give people agency over at least understanding what they should be looking at, and like piecing together maybe what they're not being told by their providers, or even in the case that they're working with like a private clinic, just giving them some kind of tool that essentially will help them have more autonomy in their own health. And yeah, I don't know, we'll
Yeah,
see
we need
that.
that.
Yeah.
And we need that because I was reading something that like a lot of new developments in like, medicine or whatever, they test on mice, right? But that they usually don't test on female mice because their hormone, like their reproductive cycle, their hormonal cycles can interrupt or disrupt the test, or if there's a mix of other, female and male mice, that it can cause issues. So a lot of the things, new progressive things, usually are tested only on male mice. So they don't even know how it like could affect females sometimes.
Gosh, that's so fascinating. I didn't know that. I'm gonna have to dig into that a little bit more too, because I know like oftentimes the conversations I have with clients who come to me with lab work are very much explaining that like here are how reference ranges are determined. Just because you're in the green or just because you're not in the green, it doesn't just mean one to one that like things are okay or they're not okay. Like we need to build a comprehensive picture and understand relative to what's normal for you, how this actually makes sense. And particularly for the enhanced female, or the female who's gone through decades of using some kind of synthetic hormone that now has modulated their cycle. It's like, okay, like we might not even be working with your baseline, but really this artificial environment that is created from things that you've been taking or things you put in place long ago. So it's no, I really hope that we see the development where females are kind of given that assistance that, I mean, like we so desperately need. But Jasmine, this has been crazy. I'm so glad we did this. Thank you so much. Probably should have led with this. I've had the sickness, the one that we can't say on YouTube. I've had that for like about 10 days. So
No.
I should have led with that. That's why I'm so nasally, and I was really trying not to like have like
you sound amazing.
um where can people find you? And if people are in your area, up in your neck of the woods, where can they find your gym at?
So we are currently in the process of opening a new gym. So it should hopefully be open either late this year or early next year. And so we're located in Grants Pass, Oregon. So, you'll probably see it on my socials as we get closer to like an opening date. But you can find me, Jasmine_Shier, Shier on Instagram, or you can look up Justin Shier and I make cameos on his YouTube. I need to work on upping my social media game. I don't know. Do you ever get like the anxiety where like you don't want to open your DMs?
Oh my gosh, I live in
That's
that
me.
state.
That's
Yes.
me. I just like, I want to put down my phone and not look at it for a whole day. I'm bad.
Yeah.
I need to do better.
I It's the equivalent of, I mean, like financial freedom of having that like social media freedom is like that's something both my boyfriend and I like our businesses largely depend on organic marketing. So it's like we'll do our coffee, we'll do our shit. I mean, he's like, I don't give a fuck. Like I'm gonna drop off the face of the earth as soon as like he's like, give me 3 years. Like no one will know where I'm at. But know where you're at. But I very much
Honestly,
like,
sounds good.
yeah, I
Have it in the
cherish,
works.
yeah. Seriously, yeah. I cherish those days that we can like both be off our phones. So I love that for you guys. This has been great. Thank you so much for giving me the time. And
Yeah.
do we have any shows outlined or like general targets we're aiming for?
I am hoping for a November debut at Texas State and Atlantic Coast are the two that I'm aiming for. So that is, post Olympia qualification if I do qualify, and I'm hoping I do. I would qualify for next year's Olympia.
Beautiful. That is going to be fun. Who knows? I'm from Texas originally, so sometimes in the fall I'll go back visit family. So if I'm in those areas, maybe I'll come say, yeah. Thank you for doing this. Thank you so much. You guys, thank you for tuning in as always. I will see you in the next one.